Hello, Cobber. How you going?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Well, apart from the fact I've nicked my cheek here, and as I look at myself in the video recording image, it looks bruised and red. I don't know what I've done. Shaving in the shower.
Yeah, so you tell me. It looks more like Joe's been punching you because you've been belligerent and she's been having to
That's right.
chastise you and get you back under control, I'm going to imagine.
Yes, possibly. I'm all right. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. I'm not too bad.
Anyway, Steve, you're looking good. What we're talking about today?
I would say I'm always looking good, Mark, but that's a big fat Pinocchio lie. Last time we spoke, we talked about something just a little bit frivolous, didn't we? Sort of cartoons and stuff like that from our dim and distant past and our youth. How about something a little bit more, well, it might be a bit more serious, it might not be, who knows? Something that profoundly has altered your attitudes and approach to life. Now, that may be one thing, it may be an event, it may be a number of things, who knows? But something that has altered your attitudes and approach to life.
Yeah, I don't know how much to say, how much to reveal, but anyway, why not? There's three, actually. You would think they're disparate, but I think overall they're connected. And I'm going to connect them in the fact that I believe we are here for a reason. Now, for yourself, Steve, it's because it's God and we're all part of the divine plan, which I also accept. But we're here for specific things, either to achieve or to go through on life. For me, it's been a difficult one, quite a winding, difficult path at times. So, on reflection, it could have been something that could very easily have defeated me, but I've chosen not to. And in fact, I keep thinking of this scene from Batman where he's down in that cavern, crawling out that hole to get out. It begins when I was a child. Now, I've said to you before, for my first 6 or 8 years, I blocked it out. I think the trauma was too much, and it would be something along the lines of my mum went through a divorce, my proper father. There were times when he would come home and he wasn't in the best of emotional states. And of course, as a child, you are affected by that. So, what could possibly be the positive of any of that? Well, I like to see the positive, and I think it was teaching me to become the person that I became. That however bad it was in the past doesn't mean that you take a dark road yourself. Just because adults around you are falling into domestic abuse, drunken violence, neglect, that you have to follow the same. That you can break that generational trajectory, curse, whatever. Now, I, for years, didn't know whether that was normal until I began to realise that no, people can remember when they're 2 and 3. And there are occasionally one or two things that over the years have come up, bubbled up out the surface. I remember that when we was on the Charybdis, my girlfriend, it was the first opportunity for her to come down into the mess. First time she'd ever been in a warship. And she came down 2 or 3 times, if I remember, while we was in Plymouth. She said, I've never forgotten it 40 odd years later. Did you realise, like you, a lot of the men there are from broken backgrounds? And I didn't. I hadn't twigged that. And I look back on the ships I've served, and there were so many like me. Were we after some stability that the Navy could give us? I don't know. That's where I'll start. I've got a couple more to talk about, but that's just like to whet the appetite. What about yourself?
Look, I think that those observations that you've made are really important, and some of the points that you've raised are absolutely fundamentally important for anyone who is ever found themselves in a situation like you grew up in, from broken home through issues going on in the family, that no matter what dark path you are coming down, you can choose. Whatever that dark path is, you have the choice. I was only talking to somebody this morning about choices and was trying to encourage this individual to think well and to choose well, so that not to be a victim of his circumstance, not to be a victim of what's going on around him, to actually say, actually, it doesn't matter what this person says, it doesn't matter what this person does, it doesn't matter what this person's intent is. I have the ability to choose my response, and I have the ability to break something. You touched on curses, whether generational curses or whether it's just a break a bad trajectory. And I think that is absolutely important for people to understand. Nothing can hold you in that rut unless you allow it to. Once you get to a certain age where you can start to formulate your thinking, and you have to choose. And so once you make those choices, it may only move you a degree, but a degree over a long period of time moves you to a totally different end destination. So I think that's a very important point. Whatever your background, whatever your situation, whatever your circumstance, you have the power to choose certain pathways and you have the power to make decisions. Now, I recognise that there are some people who are in such terrible situations in life that power has pretty much been sort of wrested from them for whatever reason, whether it's abusive relationships or whatever it might be. And that's very difficult, and that obviously has to be navigated very differently. But for the vast majority of people who have just come from dysfunctional backgrounds, whatever that dysfunction looks like, you come to a point in life where you can now choose. You come out from under the roof of your parents. If your parents were drunks, if they were abusive, if they were whatever, you step out from under that roof. And what you choose to do is not to flip and replicate that life for your life going forward. Your choice. And that gives you power. That gives you absolute power, and it gives you the opportunity to carve out a niche for yourself in something else, as obviously you did and have done very successfully over the last 40 odd years. So I just wanted to pick up on that. So I think it's a very valid point, mate. Very good point.
Cheers, mate. What about you?
Yeah, something that's profoundly altered my attitudes and approach to life. I had a very traditional upbringing where you knew that you were a child, you were not encouraged to be anything other than a child. I don't know how to describe it really. It's just a standard upbringing. Not bad, not always good, but stable, steady. Within that, there were things that went on within our family, which I won't talk about, but they certainly colour your perspective, and they cause you to form some sort of protective wrap around you. So that's what I did when I was a very young man. I put a big protective wrap around me and lived within my protective wrap and lived within my imagination in many respects. So I was very self-orientated in terms of how I entertained myself, how I kept my nose clean, where I put myself if things weren't too flash. And I set this nice big cocoon around myself. Now, setting a cocoon around yourself is great, but at some point you should emerge from that. And I think what I did with that cocoon is then when I left home, it gave me a place to retreat back into when I joined the forces and things weren't pleasant for me at certain times. I could retreat back into that cocoon, and then I could actually build around that as well. And so my early life, I made a promise to myself when I was a very, very, very young little boy that I would never cry again. And that stayed with me up until I had what one can only describe as a mystical, spiritual experience sort of 10, 12 years ago. And then that opened the floodgates and broke a lot of crap. But I would never cry in life. I was never going to cry. And so, again, that sort of set me on a pathway and an attitude to how I would then deal with life, which was very useful to me in the work that I went on to do, because I became very hard emotionally and very immune to the things that I saw. That was useful, but not the best way to do life. It certainly set the attitude and the approach to my life, though, in terms of how I responded to conflict, how I responded to all sorts of things, which was interesting.
In what way?
Well, because you as the individual, you who you are there, but what you manifest is something that you're not. I have had very few, very, very, very few close friends who I would engage with on any level of dialogue or personal verbal intimacy at all. Very few, because I've always been a bit held back, always a bit reserved, and I've always been a little bit, how's that going to work? You as that more sensitive, creative being gets wrapped up in this hard shell. The hard shell is what people see. And so over the years, I've had people say to me, oh, we know what you're like, mate. You won't take any nonsense. You're this, you're that, you're the other. And I think to myself, you don't know me. You know what I've shown you, because I've spent years crafting this, and this is what I want you to see. But you don't know me. You don't know in here. You don't know what really drives me, what really fuels me, what really motivates me, what keeps me awake at night. And probably everybody does this to some degree. We all wear masks, don't we?
Absolutely. I've come to call it the Lutein Bell effect. So HMS Lutein sank off the Dutch coast after the Battle of Camperdown, 1797, I think it was. And years later, the bell was found and it was brought up, but it had been on the ocean bed so long you couldn't tell its shape. It had all been crusted over. So some guy spent years chipping away until he revealed what was underneath this beautiful bell, and then presented it to Lloyd's of London. So every time a ship sinks, they now ring the Lutein bell. It's got its own unique place in Lloyd's of London. On a pedestal, it's like an icon, a relic. Beautiful piece. We're the same. We put these walls up, don't we, to protect ourselves. Cocoon, you say, well, it could have been in a crust, just like the Lutein bell. Barnacles. And it takes a lot to chip off, which is what I'm going to get to in my final point. You ever read a book called Swan Song by Robert McCammon? It's a fantasy book about a woman in a dystopic future in which, for some reason, their faces crossed over until they crack open and reveal their true selves below. They'll come out looking grotesque, but if they have been good, they'll come out almost angelic. And it's a great way to say that what are we going to be once we get rid of our crust? Once you have moved away from certain work like you have and what you've become, will you continue that way or can you remake yourself into something different? But sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. And I do think this is actually all a process. And if you are willing to engage in the process, then things change in your life. As I said, I formed my views very early as a very little lad. And don't get me wrong, not because I think I had a terrible upbringing or a terrible home life or anything like that. I absolutely adore my family, my parents, my brother and sister. I loved the little village that I grew up in. I loved having my grandparents close by. I was so privileged in all of that. But nothing is perfect. And there are always things that go on. And so as a little chap, you develop a mechanism. And the mechanism that I developed was to put this cocoon, this shell around me and to ensure that I was well barricaded in whenever I felt that I was going to come under attack, for whatever that was. And as I got older, as I say, I then started to build more and more layers out. So you put one wall round, then you build another wall, and then you make it a little bit higher, and then you make it even deeper because you're coming at different things and you need more than one layer of defence. So when I emigrated over to New Zealand and joined the New Zealand police, that began a series of unravelling for me. Unravelling because policing over here is very different from policing in the UK. And so I was having to unravel from the style, the method, the way that we used to do things to now moving into this other way of doing things. And as I reflect back, I think this has all been really helpful to me because it's been very transitional, but it's been quite gentle in most respects. So probably apart from last year, which was not quite so gentle, that was a bit more of a guillotine moment. But for the last sort of 2 decades, it's been quite gentle unravelling. And the last 10 years has been a very broad unravelling of everything that I thought and everything that I've held that defines me, that makes me. And it's made me question lots of things around all of that, which I think has been really healthy, to be quite honest. And it's left me in a position where I'm still clueless. I ain't got a clue where I'm going or what I'm doing, but I'm also not bound up in the way that I perhaps was. My early family life, my transition into a career into the armed forces, my transition into the police, my transition to another country, to another policing style, and then stepping out of the police into the work that I then went on to do up until last year when that all came to a close. So those were sort of significant events that happened, and each of those events has helped me recalibrate and redirect and take a re-examination of where my life has come from and where it should head towards.
It never ceases to amaze me how similar we are. Absolutely. There must have been a life path we chose together, because there was a point about 2002, 2003, and it may seem strange. I was living in the UK. I'd kind of come to an end of wanting to live there, wanted to move abroad, and I knew it was going to be New Zealand. And do you remember the Two Towers, Lord of the Rings? There is, at the end, Gollum's song. And I was at home, I'd watched the movie, I was in the kitchen, and I was listening to the Gollum song. And there's this line there, no one was there for me. And it just literally dragged me back to my childhood. I started crying, and I probably didn't stop for half an hour. My wife had to comfort me. And that was when the dam burst. And I realised I'd been carrying all of this heavy weight, this awful energy, for so long, it just had to get rid of. And I think that helped when it came to move abroad, because then I thought, well, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to restart. And I found it very difficult when I came over as well. As a teacher in England, you can get away with a lot of stuff, especially teaching boys. To come to a mixed school in a foreign country, the humour wasn't the same, they didn't get it, all the references, and I felt like a sore thumb. When I got to 2012, 2013, I realised I was being really affected by people around me, people I worked with. We had decided we're going to move away, and I knew that that was going to help because energetic build-up of the negativity of these people was really bringing me down. And when we moved, it was almost as though the fumes that I'd been going on for 2 or 3 years before that caused a mental energetic collapse. And for almost 2 years, I call it on the hill, we lived on a hill at that time, I just withdrawn into myself. I now can say the language that at that time I didn't know. And strangely, it's New Age thinking, but it's an old religious phrase. It comes from a mystic called St. John of the Cross, called Dark Night of the Soul, La Noche Oscura del Alma. It was the stripping away of ego, vanity, worth, and you feel lost. I wouldn't say depression, I think that's the wrong word. You are forced to go within to confront, who are you? What are you really? And when I look back, it was then I threaded the path I'd gone from my childhood to that time when I broke down in the kitchen to moving abroad, all the energy, blah, 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 and then what is it for? Because I'd hit 50. And I think it was that magical number when you hit 50. This would have been about 2014. Probably similar era to the time when you went through it. And I didn't know where I was going. I remember laying there in bed thinking, what's happening? Please help me. What can I do? And it didn't have a job again, because we'd moved down here, and to move, my wife had got a job and I decided to come down as part-time. But of course, that was the first time in 40 years that I was not working for 5 days a week. And then I realised all this stuff that I'd been told that I must be, that I thought I was a lie. And I had to reinvent myself. And there was this key moment when I thought, I either give in, I walk around depressed, dishevelled, or I'm going to start afresh. And that's slowly, like Batman coming out of that hole, I came to the point where I'm going to start afresh. And by 2015, 2016, I looked different, I thought different, I was different. But when you see a sword being banged and hammered, it goes through hell to be tempered. And I had gone through that difficult process. I wouldn't say hell, but it was really awful. And when I came out, I was a better person. Didn't see that at the beginning of that long process, and I'm not sure I'd want to go through it again. But looking back, it was very useful.
Yeah. And I think recognizing the process is really, really important. Recognizing that it is a process. Recognizing that, as with any process, it takes time to complete. I think you said that you felt like you'd been stripped back. I would imagine that's a very common type of feeling. It's certainly a feeling, and it's the term that I have used for myself. I feel like I was stripped back and have been continually being stripped back until I'm left with very little around me that I had put value in all these years, and asking the same question, what the hell is this all about? And, we've touched on this in our previous conversations with redundancy and how do you deal with it and that sort of thing. But certainly last year, when I was made redundant, after 40 years of service, you think, what the hell has my last 40 years been about? Who am I? What am I? What is my sense of purpose? Do I even know who I am? What can I do outside of the confines of the very narrow specializations that I've worked in over the years? What can I bring to anything? I'm now outside of that world, and most people don't need my peculiar set of skills in the normal world. So what do you do? In fact, who are you? It's this unraveling. It's this gently pulling of the threads until you're left with something. And then you go, well, what am I left with? And then what does that mean? And what really matters? And I think that over the last 9 months, I have had to reflect long and hard on that, which is why I haven't been quick to just jump into any other work and just rush off and try and get another job in public service somewhere. Because I'm now having to question whether or not that narrative is what I really want in my life. And I'm not sure that it is. Been there, done it, got the T-shirt, but I'm not sure that that actually is who I am. It may have been what I have been, but I don't know if it's who I am. In fact, I'm convinced it's not who I am. And as you know, I've got memorabilia all around me for various reasons. And I think, yeah, that's what I've done. That's what I've been, but it's not who I am.
So do you think that you've got to the end process yet where you can see a way forward, or are you still in that uncertain period?
No, I think I'm still in a process, mate. So I know that I've got purpose in certain areas, that I have a role and a function to perform in certain areas, which I will do. I still sense that there is something else that I need to do. What that is, I don't yet know. And I'm still trying to work through that and trying to come to some sort of understanding of what that is. What it won't be is it won't be the same as things were before. And what it won't be is it won't be driven by financial considerations or even professional qualifications, a quest for it. Because I think to myself, for what purpose? Why would I be doing this? I mean, I've thought about going and doing long-term study because I would quite enjoy the challenge of studying, and I'd quite enjoy coming out with a qualification, whether that's a master's or whether that's a PhD or something like that. But then I think, well, for what purpose? This would be years more of my life dedicated to me, whereas perhaps I could spend whatever years of my life I do have left dedicated to something far bigger than me.
We have shared a past so similar, it's freaky. And we happen to be unique that we're here and we've hooked up and we're doing this and another channel, Sacred Book, and I can't help thinking it's for a reason. We have gained so much knowledge and experience, we may as well pass it over to people.
Well, you can share what your experiences are. It's one of the ways of learning, isn't it? Experiential learning. You do not have enough life to experience everything that life has to offer. But what you can do is you can listen to a range of other voices who have experienced certain things, and you can learn through their experiences. And then you can build that into your own life and say, I've heard about this man, this woman who did this, this, and this is what they got from doing that. Therefore, I won't do that, or therefore, I would like to do that. So you can bring other people's experiences into your life to help you. And whether anybody were to listen to anything that we have to say and go, oh, that's really interesting, that was helpful, that helped me, then that's great. And the reality is, mate, if you can help one flipping person, if you can help direct one person's life onto a better trajectory, to lift them out of that dark path that they've been walking, and to encourage them to actually lift their vision and see the value that they are as an individual and the ability that they have to make choices and that they can still do that, that's great. That's absolutely brilliant. Makes it all worthwhile.
Well, being the religious of us, whoever saves a single life is considered to have saved the whole world.
Over the last, 10, 12 years, there was one incident that happened a few years ago up in Auckland where I was up there meeting a member of my team, and on the way back to the airport, I had arrived at the airport. I'd got the flights wrong, timings wrong. So we left to arrive at the airport an hour before my flight. And as I'm heading to the airport, get to a cross junction, and to my left, there's a dirty, great big truck, which is stopped at the junction. There's a guy with high-vis vest stood next to the truck being dirty, great big articulated lorry. And underneath the front wheels of the truck is an individual who's laid down. And as we sort of drive across the junction, I do a double take. And what I thought was somebody working on the front of the truck is actually somebody who has been squashed by the truck and has been run over. And so my colleague and I were able to pull the car up, leap out the car, and go and render assistance to this individual who was in an incredibly bad way. In all of my years, I have never seen so much mess, and I've seen a lot of mess in places. And we managed to stem her bleeding, which was quite awkward. And she had something like 7 blood transfusions at the scene before she was casevaced out by helicopter. Now, I think back over all of my recent years of work, and it would have been worth it just for that one event. Not only did the surgeons perform incredible miracles by saving her legs, but they kept her alive. And to the best of my knowledge, she's still alive and doing okay. So you think to yourself, yeah, okay, so I've had 12 years of doing X. At least I was in the right place at the right time to achieve that. Wrong flight, happened to just turn up there, happened to just be with 2 blokes who are both ex-police, who both knew about first aid, who were both able to render it in a situation where other people were just stood there with their mouths open and couldn't do anything. And I can understand why they didn't. That's no criticism of them. It flipping blows your socks off when you see a mess like that, and it's horrible. You think, yeah, okay, everything for a purpose, and if my purpose over these last few years doing what I've done was just for that end, then that's good enough. That's good enough. I'm very happy with that. But I do suspect, and I do hope, that I've got more in me yet to give into different areas. It won't be the same as it was, because I am not the same as I was 9 months ago, and that's been a process as well.
Things happen for a reason, and I think wherever life takes us, it's for the right reason. So we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, let's see where it goes, mate. And enjoy the ride while you're doing it.
Absolutely. Fourth gear, don't forget.
That's it. Ratchet up there, mate. You've got to do that.
Life is a journey, not the destination.
It is. Life is a journey, not the destination. You are absolutely right. That's what I say about faith. Faith is a journey. Faith is not the destination.
Let's enjoy it while we can. Well, speak to you soon, mate.
Take care, buddy.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care.